Joining me now is Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Democrat from Illinois, and MSNBC contributor Melissa Harris Perry, a professor at Tulane and a columnist for The Nation. Congresswoman, I've said I disagree with what is going on today. I've worked with some of these mayors around the country. I've stood with them. To some of my friends in the progressive community disagreeing with me, I stand against them now when I disagree with them. Is there a new movement for fairness in this country that Republicans just don't get, Congresswoman?
There's no question about it, and I believe that movement is unstoppable regardless of what mayors may do. And you said it right. The conversation has changed. And the Occupy Wall Street and Occupy around the country has made a real difference. Now they're talking about, even on the House floor, 99% versus the 1%. And of course, the Republicans are relentlessly defending that 1%. It's the inequality, stupid, is really the message of the Occupy movement. And I think most Americans, I know most Americans get it. 81% and sometimes more think that we should be taxing millionaires and billionaires.
Well, Congresswoman, let me just put a point right there, and I'll let you finish, to show you're right that they have changed the conversation, and that's what protest is all about, changing the climate, changing the conversation. Look at this full screen where there are signs the GOP could cave on taxes, even diehards like Tom Coburn. Now, it says Senator Coburn has said this: from tax write-offs for gambling losses, vacation homes, and luxury yachts to subsidies for their ranches and estates, the government is subsidizing the lifestyles of the rich, and the famous multimillionaires are even receiving government checks for not working. This is Senator Tom Coburn. Now, this is certainly not you or me, but this is clearly because the climate is changing.
But wait, let me add a note of caution here. I congratulate Senator Coburn, who I was on the Simpson-Bowles Commission with, for saying that. But I fear that the Republicans now are trying to lure Democrats into putting proposals on the table by saying that, yes, we will put taxes and we will, go after the rich, to put that on the table. But at the end of the day, Grover Norquist has already said they've agreed privately that they're not going to raise taxes. So I want Democrats to be very careful not to say, okay, well, then we'll do something about entitlements, which I don't think should be on the table anyway. And then the Republicans say, oh, never mind. We didn't really mean it about going after the wealthy in our country.
So, Dr. Professor Perry, we shouldn't trust them. There may be some switch and bait here.
Well, sure. I mean, the fact that all of this is occurring in the context of the super committee and their deadline, their kind of constantly moving deadline, should worry us. But look, what I really appreciate about how you frame this is that this is about some fundamental American principles. And I think this is where the GOP is really getting it wrong when they talk about this class warfare notion. When I teach my intro American politics classes, there are two things that consistently come up. One is that Americans don't mind economic inequality when that economic inequality seems to be based on positions of merit. So it's not class warfare in the sense that, the Occupy movements or anyone else is claiming everyone should have exactly the same income or drive exactly the same car or any of those kinds of scary notions that we hear the GOP trying to push back on. It's rather that the current inequality is so extreme and class mobility is such a dream at this point. The idea that someone could work hard from poverty and move into the middle class or from the middle class and into wealth, that has disintegrated so fully that we know that this inequality is not merit-based. This inequality is fundamentally about entrenched interests protecting themselves. And then the second big thing is that in a democracy, the key element of what makes a democracy not an autocracy, not a totalitarian system, is that winners don't take all. Just because you win in a democracy, you still have to share with the so-called losers in a democracy, right? If you think you're always going to be a winner, then you should prefer a totalitarian system. Democracy is for those who have fewer resources, less voice, less opportunity, because in a democracy, we are all meant to be sharing not only our resources, but our power. That's how this system is meant to work.
And see that, Congresswoman, that's why I love having Melissa Harris Perry on. She's so smart, but bringing it right down where common guys like you and me are. Where are the jobs? How are we going to get these people to get up off of this no tax pledge and provide us with some economic balance where people can get jobs?
Again, I think that the conversation has gone way past this obsession that we had before, the country had before, with deficit reduction. I always thought that was pretty fake anyway, because people don't want to see their Medicare or their Social Security cut. We've moved on to jobs now. That's the proper obsession right now with the American people, because they get it. If there are jobs, then our economy grows. But you've seen it. The Republicans have just said no, 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 and more no. They are betting against the economy. They want the economy to fail so that they can defeat Barack Obama. And that's the sorry state that the Republicans are in right now. And so we just need to make it clear that we're going to continue to fight to put America back to work. And if they keep pushing against us, it's at their own peril.
Now, let me go back to you, Professor Perry. Let me ask you this, Melissa. When you look at this poll where you see income inequality is a problem, 87% Democrats say it is, 74% likely voters, 64% Republicans say it's a problem. The politics of it, I understand the framework, and you're right that we've got to understand the broad context of democracy versus totalitarianism, but the politics of it that we're dealing with on Election Day of 2012 is, how can the Republicans run against the fact that even just about two-thirds of their own party is saying that this inequality is a serious issue to them?
Right. Well, look, and this is a stunning sort of disjuncture in their head. So you have on the one hand, Mitt Romney saying corporations are people because they're made up of people who have jobs. Well, I'm not sure if they've noticed, but in fact, all of these government agencies that they're going to cut, you know, we had Governor Perry saying he was going to cut education, commerce, and something else, right? I mean, the fact is that there are people who work in each of those. And in fact, when we look at what's happened in terms of unemployment in the past couple of years since the Republicans have come into control in the House and in so many state legislators, what's happened is that private sector jobs have been offset by the loss of public sector jobs because they've been cutting these so-called wasteful government spending. Wasteful government spending, my friends, that's jobs. Those are working people. And so, you know, the Congresswoman is right. Part of this is about entitlements and the creation of our safety net. But the other critical part of it here is to recognize that when you start talking about, for example, eliminating the Department of Education, you are talking about eliminating thousands of jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have to say it that way.
Well, and it's reverse Robin Hood. I want to thank both of you. And that is why, let me say this, Congresswoman and Professor Perry, that is why protesters have made a big difference. They've changed the conversation. I said when I started this show, when you walk in 30 Rockefeller Center, there are 2 Al's now. On the NBC side, there's Al Roker. He gives you the climate. On the MSNBC side, there's Al Sharpton. I'm with those that change the climate. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky and Melissa Harris Perry, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton.